Cancer in the 4th. So here we've moved in, as we start to look at this again, the polarity is start to move inward. It's passive, feminine, receptive. Cardinal, water. So we're getting into the element of emotions now with water. And so as we know, with that out-in energy, there is a need for the container again. Whereas the fire and air signs want no containment, they want to just be able to go. The earth and water signs want the container. They want, especially your water signs. Okay? And so Cancer is ruled by the moon. And the moon is the archetype of our emotions and our self-image. I look at Taurus being an inner self-reliance that has to happen foundationally on that physical level, but self-reliance covers all 4 levels: physical, emotional, mental, spiritual. Cancer moves in to focus on the emotional self-reliance. And what's all too typical in our world today via the human-made distortions is an emotional self-reliance that is dependent upon someone outside of ourselves.
Or family.
Family.
Cancer.
So we start to get into Cancer. We start to get into the home and the family. So you can see that as being the nadir or the IC of any chart. It's that 4th house cusp. We're starting to initiate a whole nother quadrant, so we're cardinal again. So we're back to initiating. But you know, how many of you have related to that Cancer 4th house archetype, and they'll express this emotion, they'll initiate themselves in an emotional direction, and then they'll turn around and go the other direction. Okay? That back and forthness with the emotions needing to feel secure. Another also common thing that starts to happen when we move into the 4th and the 10th, Cancer, Capricorn, is we start to deal with the gender issues. So we know when we start to see a lot of the typical things in evolutionary astrology, whenever you will see Pluto, the soul, in the 4th or the 10th, when you see the nodal axis in the 4th or the 10th, or Cancer, Capricorn, or you can even see an ascendant, descendant in Cancer, Capricorn. You see lots of planets, Cancer, Capricorn, 4th, 10th. You start to see the gender switching issues. Okay? And a story that I've heard in relating to this gender thing is a Jeffrey analogy that always made sense to me is souls will have a tendency, and especially when you're dealing with more consensus state, you know, this becomes less and less an absolute with the more the soul evolves. When we will have a tendency to incarnate ourselves in the same gender, lifetime after lifetime. And you look at it like a pair of shoes or a pair of blue jeans. How many times the first time you buy a new pair of blue jeans and you first time or two you wear them, they're stiff, they're uncomfortable. As you start to wear them and you wash them, they start to get familiar. You know what it's like. Pretty soon they're so threadbare, you're forced to tear them apart. It's kind of how we go through the gender thing. So we'll go through one gender until we have exhausted the lessons of that gender up to that point. Not entirely, but up to that point where our evolution could be, for instance. And it's necessary to start learning the other gender to have balance. And when we look at our evolved souls, one of the things that we note about them is that they become more and more androgynous-like because they have learned to balance the gender. And so, and so, another archetype that will come along with these with Cancer. Usually, Cancer in the 4th house will relate to the mother, and Capricorn in the 10th will relate to the father. It's more in your traditional astrologies. When you start looking at it from an evolutionary astrology point of view, Cancer in the 4th will relate to the more nurturing parent, whereas Capricorn in the 10th will relate to the more authoritarian or in-charge parent. Okay, the stay-at-home parent versus the out-in-the-world parent.
What if one parent died and the other one was not nurturing?
Typical with Cancer and Capricorn, and a typical situation with a 4th house Pluto. It's not always an absolute, but many times when you have a 4th house Pluto, you have one or both parents who were either physically and or emotionally not there. What happens when we don't have the emotional nurturing of Cancer in the 4th house is we create emotional displacements, emotional projections that we then carry into adulthood, project out to the partner. So we're always trying to find the partner who will recreate the relationship that's wounded with the parent.
So the father as well?
Both genders. Can happen, both genders. Pam?
I'm confused. Okay, Cancer and Capricorn, when you talk about this gender switch thing,
Mhm.
that's not just in the 4th house. That
No.
Okay. Yeah,
No.
okay. That's what I
It's
wanted to
both
know.
of them. It's both the polarities.
Because I got it in the 3rd, and I was always told that I gender switched. So
Mm-hmm.
you saying in the 4th, it just threw me. So it can be in any. It's just when it's Cancer, Capricorn.
Cancer, Capricorn, 4th, 10th. It relates to the Cancer, Capricorn in the 4th, 10th.
Okay.
You have your nodal axis in the 3rd, 9th, but it's Cancer, Capricorn.
There can be a gender. So
Yes.
it doesn't
Yes,
matter.
it's not coming from the 3rd and the 9th.
It's the Cancer and Capricorn, whatever
Yes.
whatever
Yes.
signs.
Yes.
That's the gender
Mhm,
switch. It's
mhm.
not okay.
Yep.
That's what I wanted to know.
Yep. Yep. Not all. Yeah, it's not an absolute. Now here's some other things. Here again. Point. Observation correlation. You can run into somebody who has a lot of Cancer in the 4th house, and this is the last lifetime they're going to be in whatever gender they're in, and they're needing to switch over. You can have them have a lot of Cancer 4th house, and this is true for the polarity as well. A lot of Cancer in 4th house, and they've just switched in the last lifetime or two. You know that somewhere there are gender lessons, whether there's been an actual switch in genders with the souls incarnating, or where there's just some type of polarity lessons going on with the genders that'll be coming through. Okay?
Thinking about that?
Go ahead.
To consider, if you really think about it, the switching genders is a very intense process, even traumatic at times, because of the whole emotional, hormonal, biological differences between males and females. And so if you've been in one gender for 5 or 10 or 15 lifetimes and you're switching, not only are you having to get used to this whole new thing, all of your past life memories are going to be of being of the other gender. And since this is mostly repressed in most of us, it can create a great deal of confusion. I do see a great correlation in looking at people's charts. When you find people that have this signature, I very often find extremely feminine-like males and very
Yes.
masculine-like
Yes.
women,
Exactly.
which to me has become a correlation that is going
Yep.
on.
Yep.
The signature would be having planets in both signs, Cancer, Capricorn, or just one or the other?
No, both.
Both.
Both. It can be one or the other.
4th or 10th, or the nodal axis in the 4th
In the
and
4th or
10th,
10th.
or the nodal axis in Cancer and Capricorn.
Right.
It's the primary signature.
That's the primary signatures. You can have some secondary signatures if you see a preponderance of planets in the 4th house or the Capricorn, and through observation correlation, exactly what Steve said, you know, here's a soul that has all these characteristics of the opposite gender. You know, you can kind of, whoo, there's a switch that's going on here. I mean, this can help explain some of the homosexuality. You know, when you look at someone who has, like Steve said, been in one gender for so long, and they're just switching over, the soul memory is still attracted to the gender they've become. So therefore, you have to release the judgment. And this isn't, you know, I think as I've watched the distortions of human-made conditioning, I think I can see judgments in every archetype. And so what will happen to the Cancer and Capricorn is we will see the judgments around gender. You know, in Jeffrey's words, you either have to be Betty Crocker or Marlboro Man, you know, and it does not fit. And especially think about this now in terms of a soul that's trying to individuate, or in a soul that's trying to really become spirituated. And remember what we said about Source itself, God, Goddess. It's beyond gender, it's both genders. So we had to make peace with all of that gender confusion, gender identity, gender balance. We have to work with all of that. And so, you know, this is a whole area that you can bring into, for those of you who want to be evolutionary astrologers counseling. I mean, look at how the wealth of information that you can bring to the table for your homosexual clients who have all the ridicule that they have to deal with, you know, trying to just go through natural law process via reincarnation. Okay? What else with the Cancer Capricorn archetype as we're starting to move in?
Wasn't the moon conjunct Saturn is also a recent, in balsamic is a recent gender switch too?
Yes, it can be, or it can also be getting ready to switch.
Oh, the balsamic would be going into it.
It's possible. Don't take it as an absolute.
No, of course not. No, of course not.
Again, you could theoretically, you could look at moon balsamic Saturn as they're culminating issues with that gender. You could look at moon new phase Saturn as they're initiating issues with that gender. What was the thing with some of the, I'm trying to remember, with some of the sexuality research that Jeffrey would do? Transsexuals. He would many times find a moon balsamic Saturn in their charts. Now don't freak out about it, okay? Because there's lots of us who have the moon balsamic Saturn, and it doesn't mean that. Again, individual context. Clear?
Yeah, I just can't figure out why I'd freak anybody out, but that's okay.
Somebody's looking at their...
That freaked me out. Go ahead.
What about bisexuality? Someone who swings both.
All kinds of things. It can mean all kinds of things. You can't just put an absolute on it. It could mean somebody who could be becoming very comfortable with both genders and wants to have a lifetime of experiencing both genders. You know, I remember personally asking Jeffrey when I first started studying with him, what is the real meaning of homosexuality? What is the lessons from it? And he said, Kim, it's learning how to be androgynous. It's learning to, I think these were my words, but they may be Jeffrey's. It's learning to love the soul beyond the body. Mm-hmm.
I was just going to say one of my very dear friends who's been a devout lesbian just fell in love with a man, and she just is doing it.
There you go.
Oh my God, wow.
Wow, and what about the freedom to have that ability?
Really, her
You
whole
know,
life. I know.
to be able to go there.
Oh.
Lori and I watched an interesting documentary on TV a little while ago about some other cultures that don't have judgments and taboos around gender issues and sexuality. and how natural they can relate it, and they just allow people to, women marry women, men marry men, all kinds of variations, all kinds of possibilities. And because it's not a taboo in the society, it is something that can be very loving. And so some souls do it for a while. They experience and learn whatever lesson they needed to learn, and then they go on. Both directions, from homo to hetero and hetero to homo, and bi. You know, we have so much distortion around gender issues. We don't know what's natural. Yeah, there are two species, and we know it takes one of each to co-create. But there's a variety of experience that comes within that. And if you really probably look with some backwards in some of our ancient cultural histories that have, become his story, if you really look back at them, it's probably many times always been that way. You see it in nature. Nature doesn't get hung up over it. So our vast capacity to think, Gemini, also confuses us, Gemini, distorts us, Gemini, creates judgments, Gemini. So, back to this Cancer and the 4th house. It's symbolic of the womb. It's symbolic of the mother. So it's all of us learning how to emotionally nurture ourselves. So another one of the archetypes that really comes through with Cancer in the 4th house, self-love. You only love another to the degree that you love yourself. Someone else can only love you to the degree that you love yourself. Bottom line. So, got that? So emotional self-reliance. There's some other typical things that will come with this Cancer Capricorn archetype. If there is a lot of emotional wounding, we can see this archetype want to go into isolation. Via the polarity to Capricorn, we can see this archetype go into emotional denial and emotionally project it onto their partners. There's nothing emotionally wrong with me, it's all you. If you just do this, if you just grow up, blah, 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 you know.
Emotional withdrawal is like symbolic trying to return to the womb.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's another Cancer 4th house archetype that I just love. This one is very, very helpful for clients when they have a lot of this archetype in them, especially a 4th house Pluto. Sometimes that 10th house Pluto via polarity is for them to understand their withdrawal animation cycles. When you have a lot of Cancer in the 4th house and there is that withdrawal into the womb, it's because there is something that is being activated unconsciously. It's triggering deep, deep emotions that are trying to be made conscious. So you want to allow that person, you want to let that person know it's okay to go within. It's okay to withdraw. Cancer, crab. It's okay to do the withdrawal until the information pops up into your consciousness and makes itself known. Once it does that, then you will notice that Cancer, 4th house, become animated. Then they want to share it. Then they want to emote. They want to then process those emotions, activate, live those emotions. Natural cycle. Each of us have that because each of us have a 4th house and each of us have Cancer on the cusp of a house. So wherever you see that Cancer house cusp, you will notice yourself having cycles of emotional withdrawal and animation. Wonderful thing. I mean, when you tell 4th house Plutos that, Cancer souls as I call them, oh my God, the light bulbs, you just see the light bulbs go off in them.
What a relief.
Or somebody who's a Cancer sun with lots of strong Cancer or a lot of planets in the 4th house, okay? Get the archetype. And so, you know, and so then if you're relating to one of them, it's when they want to do their withdrawal thing, give them their space. Let them figure it out. And then once their emotional situation or the emotional triggers are made conscious, then they can talk about it, then they can share it with you.
What do you mean by when they do your withdrawal? I mean, what? I don't
They
get-
go within, they get moody. Cancer gets moody. Leave me alone. I don't want to talk about it.
To isolate,
Isolate.
Okay, but if
they
you're
go inside their shell.
Yes.
but how do you deal with a 9-year-old that's like that?
You let her go in her room and process through it herself, and when she wants to tell you about it, she'll tell you about it. Don't push her. Don't force. You know, what will happen, you know, here's the parent-child thing that starts to get involved with this archetype. You have a very sensitive child, and you have, let's just say, controlling, possessive mama, and she wants to force the child to deal with the emotions when the child doesn't know what's emotionally going on yet, and she wants to be alone to just figure it out on her own. And so the healthy thing is for the parent to say, fine, when you're ready to talk about it, let me know. I am always available for you emotionally, and I'll support you through your emotional process. Another thing that gets very helpful with a lot of the Cancer fourth house archetype is validating for these people that all emotions are valid. The distortions in our society, you can only show the positive emotions. You're not allowed to have your emotional negatives. Well, why do we have them? There's a reason for them. And so you let them know that the emotions are valid and there's a reason for the emotion.
I also think it's almost a form of hybrid. Like, I'm going back to it's like the idea, the archetype of hibernation with the Cancer.
It is.
That makes
It
a lot of
is.
sense, you know?
Yep, yep. And the other thing that I will do with clients when I, you know, just let them know that the emotions are valid, I say, it doesn't mean you have to act upon the emotions. But you must acknowledge the emotions, process the emotions, so that those emotions are not distorted and unconsciously, you know, controlling you. Annie?
And 10th house, take responsibility for
Yes.
those emotions.
Yes, good one.
Emotional responsibility.
Good one.
But you don't have to become them, those emotions.
You don't always have to act upon them. You know, we can, due to the distortions, you know, of guilt on the planet, you know, we feel that we're not allowed to be angry. And because of the distortion, there is a lot of anger. So you want them to know that anger is valid. There's a reason for your anger. Why do you have the anger? What does that anger represent? You want to process through the anger so that they can understand the emotions that are represented there, the distortions that are represented there, so that they can evolve, so that they can process through it, so that they can release the anger.
So it's good for them to let out their emotions, and if you have a parent that says, stop it, then that's destroying the child within.
Right. Right. Many times when you have that Cancer fourth house, there's, you know, they're deeply emotional. And parents won't allow them to emote.
And isn't that too, Kim, a lot about timing? You know, because you're coming out of Gemini, which is very yang energetically, and now you've got a yin phase. And so Cancer fourth house relating to digestion, how we really all process
There we go.
our
There we go.
You know,
Yep.
and it can take, you can be like kind of the proverbial waiting forever for somebody else, but that's exactly what one needs to do is process through.
Break. Tape change.